Hello, this is AstrologerCoach Sonja Francis, and today I want to talk to you about Saturn moving into Sagittarius. Saturn has already been in Sagittarius for a little while in the beginning of 2015, but now it is actually leaving Scorpio for good and is now ready to move into Sagittarius until December 2017. And that move will happen on September 17th at 10:49 p.m. East Coast time in the US, which is also New York time. Now, this transit definitely invites us to look for practical application of personal philosophies and attitudes towards life. And we may be firming up our belief systems, being more authentic with what we believe. And maybe it's also about freedom and liberation, like trying to abide by particular rules that can create more freedom or more liberation in our lives. And very clearly, though, it's about not having rigid thinking in our lives. So it's really staying away from rigidity, because Saturn is not about rigidity necessarily, but we tend to get rigid when we get scared. So let's talk a little bit about Saturn first before we talk a little bit more about Saturn in Sagittarius. So Saturn really teaches us about slowing things down. It's about moderation and caution. It's about having a path that we walk in the real world so we can have a physical manifestation of something that is authentic to who we are. So what we're doing with Saturn is it's almost like an inner process. We're looking at the foundations in our lives, the things that we want to build on, so that we can manifest the things that we want to manifest in the real world. And if any of these foundations is not solid, if it's not real, then we need to look at that and we need to work at that, and we need to really slow down or take a step back and just kind of like really with self-discipline and with really being present to what's going on in our lives, in the here and now, we need to start doing the work. So Saturn is about, definitely doing the work, but especially doing the work in areas of our lives where things are not bulletproof, in a sense, where we can't build on something that's not solid. And the goal or the aim of Saturn is to manifest in the real world. So therefore, it will bring our attention to all the things that are, too idealistic, or that are not solid enough, or that are where we haven't paid enough attention, where we're not in alignment with what's actually so. So all these things Saturn is just trying to point out to us. So it's very important to be very present with Saturn as well, because if we're in the past or if we're in the future, we're not actually able to see what's actually right in front of us, or what's actually realistically going on in the here and now. So the other thing with Saturn is it doesn't want us to take unnecessary risks, because it wants us to build and structure our lives in a way where we can later reap the rewards. So we don't want to be moving overboard with things. So it's a real opportunity to just kind of from the inside out, like, work hard and gain inner strength and be responsible about what we do and say, cut out any waste or excess, so that we can get rid of things in our lives that are just no longer working for us in the real world, that are no longer functioning, or that are no longer as they used to be. And that requires us really taking a good look at what is so right now. So it's also, Saturn, of course, is about improving and strengthening things in our lives that we want to build on, or where we want to manifest something that it has a useful purpose, because of course Saturn is very grounded and earthy and realistic, real oriented, right? Now, one thing I want to say about Saturn too is Saturn is not something that is Saturn is not an energy or a planet that's doing anything to you. It's just a representation of an energy that's already inside of you. So depending on what you're doing with that energy inside of you, wherever that is in your natal chart, how you're working with that energy, that is how you experience a Saturn transit. So if you are scared of Saturn moving through a house, or if you are scared of Saturn doing anything in your chart, just look to see how are you using that Saturn energy within your own lives. Are you someone who gets really rigid and really attached to the past and therefore is not actually looking at what's so now? Are you someone who is super idealistic or very loose with that Saturn energy, and you're constantly nah, I don't need to do that, or it's not important, or I don't want to take responsibility for that, or if you're doing things like that, then you're using the energy too loosely. So either way, whichever extreme you're at, it is, then you might have more of a challenging time working with the Saturn energy. For those of us who already are working with the Saturn energy in a healthy way, where we're just being realistic about what's so, and we're taking a look at, okay, where do we need to put more work into this so that this functions better in the future? For those of us, Saturn will be a little bit easier to work with. So just take a look internally. Where can you be more responsible in your own life? Where can you be less rigid? Saturn is our teacher. It's the teacher in the real world. It's not about the past. It's not about the future. It's not about fantasy. It is about what is so. Now let's talk a little bit about Saturn in Sagittarius, since that's what's going to happen for the next 2 years. And Sagittarius is the sign that belongs to Jupiter, which is the planet of expansion and growing and personal growth and, bigger and better and bigger picture and all that stuff. So Saturn comes into Sagittarius and says, okay, not so fast, because Jupiter wants to move quite fast and Sagittarius wants to move quite fast, right? So Saturn comes in, and because Saturn slows things down, Saturn says, not so fast. Let's take a look here. What is so? What is the truth here? So before we can think about what we want to build or bring forth, we really need to take a look at the larger picture, and we get to the core of what we believe life is truly about for ourselves as a society, on an individual and collective level. So it's really asking us to take on the responsibility of living by loyalty to personal truths and principles, but as they are right now, not as they used to be. So we really need to be looking at this with a critical eye to everything that doesn't accurately reflect our authentic selves any longer. So some of us get a little bit lazy sometimes when we go, oh, well, this has worked in the past, or this is what I have believed for the last 20 years, so this must be still true. Well, that is an assumption. And so Saturn in Sagittarius also invites us to take a look at our assumptions and our expectations of life. Are our assumptions really are they really true? Are they really accurate in the here and now? Or is it just something that we've dragged with us, since childhood, since our conditioning, or because of what we were taught by society or by our religion? We really need to take a closer look at and focus on, are these actually truths that still can hold to this day and time, right? Now, we, on an individual and collective level, we're definitely invited to clarify our ethics and our beliefs. And so Saturn in Sagittarius is definitely about finding this balance between not being too lax or loose and not being too controlling. And again, with Saturn, it's very important also to look at what is our intention with Saturn, because the moment we step into a fearful place, on a place where we feel overwhelmed, which is another form of fear as well, that's when we know we have to, first of all, we have to slow down, because Saturn wants us to slow down. Once we slow down, there's a little bit less overwhelm and there's a little bit less fear that's present. The other thing is too with finding this balance between not being too loose and not being too controlled. When we are coming from a fearful place, very often we tend to want to control things with Saturn. So we want to control, people with certain beliefs, or we want to, control with or hold on to, what we used to know to be true and what used to work. So this is something we really want to pay attention to, because that's the very thing that's going to cause some suffering. Okay, so Saturn in itself doesn't cause suffering. It's the fear very often that's connected, or the not wanting to slow down, the resistance of the process that Saturn has in a particular sign. That resistance is what causes the suffering. It's not necessarily the transit itself. So it's very important to remember that when we're experiencing a strong Saturn transit, slow down, don't be so scared. Just take responsibility for what is so, and take a look and work through the issues, step by step. Nothing has to happen in a minute or in a day. Step by step. You have 2 years to do this, right? Now, we definitely seek growth, because Sagittarius is all about personal growth. With Saturn there, we seek growth in a more disciplined manner, in a more structured manner, right? So everything that Saturn stands for, we want to grow, but we want to take our time and we want to do it well. Saturn is also about doing things really well, right? So the same is true with expanding on our horizons, or thinking in new ways. It's really, we want to approach things with a sense of maturity and realism. And this is really what it comes down to with Saturn in Sagittarius. It comes down to that maturity and that realism. Now, positive thinking is something that Sagittarians very much like to hold on to. They're very much positive thinkers, which is wonderful. But if the positive thinking is not based in reality, it can really be more destructive than actually good for us. It can lead to disappointment. It can lead to all sorts of things. And so the other Saturn lesson here is that we really need to cut out, excessive expectations and anything that's not truthful. Who cares if it's positive if it's not truthful? If it's not resonating with you, if it's not who you really are in that moment, then just cut it out. So the other thing is that, because Saturn is about realism, if we're working with this Saturn energy in a healthy way, and if it's something that we're able to work with without fear, it really can give us a great dose of realism without being pessimistic. Pessimistic usually comes when there's fear involved. And essentially it keeps us in line without dampening our spirits, without getting too depressed or too heavy about things, right? So again, when we're feeling depressed and heavy with a Saturn transit, that shows us that we're resisting the process. We're resisting working with the Saturn energy. We're either not wanting to take responsibility, or we're wanting to take responsibility so much that we get overwhelmed and we forget that we have to slow down. Okay, so those are usually what happens with Saturn. Now, Saturn teaches us that freedom is not about escaping responsibility, nor is it about breaking the rules, but it's what we can enjoy after we've actually tended to our responsibilities. And one thing that I've learned with Saturn is that, structure is not something that takes freedom away from us. Very often, structure is something that can help us enjoy freedom more. And this is something that, you may have to just explore that on your own as well to see how that is true for you. But that is certainly something that I have learned throughout the years with Saturn transits. Now, we may be challenged, with this transit to walk the talk and practice what we preach. Saturn in Sagittarius definitely says, it's not just about, teaching and speaking wonderful words and saying what, what's possible and, what's out there. It's also about, saying, okay, yes, I'm saying these things, but I'm also doing these things. So again, practical application with Saturn, right? So what could be coming up for us in the next 2 years with Saturn in Sagittarius is an issue around discipline and structure when it comes to teachings, religion, and freedom of thought. This is something that might be in the forefront going on, with certain things in the outside world. We might want to take a stricter look at how we share knowledge. For example, when we write something, when we share something on the internet, and there might be some more laws and rules that might be coming in the next 2 years about that, that might be applicable in regards to sharing what we know. Now, we can definitely, it's a really great practice for the next 2 years to question our basic assumptions about life. I highly recommend that, to do that on a daily basis or whenever you think about it. That could be a very healthy process with Saturn there, and to just see, like, is this true for me right now? Is this something that I can actually stand behind, or is this just something that I'm assuming? That I would recommend as a practice for the next 2 years. And it's also time for us to let go of self-defeating attitudes. It's very much about the attitude that we have towards life. And, quite frankly, questioning our assumptions about life can really be helpful with letting go of these attitudes, because sometimes we don't even question or ask ourselves, like, why do I have this attitude towards life? Why do I think everything is difficult? I mean, that's an attitude, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be that way, but where is that even coming from? And is that really true in the here and now? Or is this something that I'm just recreating for myself because I think it's true, because I have that attitude? So we got to take a really closer look at, what are our self-defeating attitudes? And expectations too, expectations definitely have a big play with Sagittarius. Sagittarius, because Sagittarius thinks big and thinks in possibilities, there are very big expectations about life very often. And so with Saturn there, we want to look at our expectations. Are they matched with reality? Again, it's always about matching it with what is so right now. So this is a really great time to enlist help of mentors, elders, and authorities on anything that we want to learn or that we want to understand about life. Make sure that you connect with someone who walks their talk and who's authentic in what they're sharing, and someone who has integrity. That's going to be very important with Saturn and Sagittarius. It's also about quality over quantity. So if you find someone who, has really a well-rounded knowledge or well-rounded understanding of something, that's going to be more important than how much they're going to be sharing with you. Now, there's definitely also focus on, for these next 2 years, what I would recommend, especially for the Sagittarians out there in the world, focus on developing one special project or dedicate yourself to 1 or 2 meaningful pursuits, but don't spread yourself too thin, because there's a tendency with Sagittarius to want to multitask and to want to do a lot of different things at the same time. With Saturn in your sign, that is not a good idea. You really want to focus on 1 or 2 things and just do those things well, because Saturn wants to really do things well. And since we have to slow down so much as well, we might not be able to do more than 1 or 2 things anyways, in these next 2 years. So that might be helpful to just understand, right? Now, we want to go beyond conditioned thinking structures. We want to be more authentic about what we believe. And so we really want to check to see if the beliefs that we have currently really match our direct experience of life. So it's always a good idea to not double check with what used to be, but with what actually is right now. And I know I said that already a couple of times, but it's really, really important. So as it is for you now, not how it was 5 years or 10 years ago. All right. Now, if you're studying right now, if you're in college right now, or if you're studying, astrology or something that you're interested in currently, it is definitely important to question exactly what you're working towards, because Saturn is also very goal-oriented. So just take a look. Does this line of study match what I'm truly about right now? Is this really in alignment with myself? And if you're beginning new studies at this time, then you might be preparing yourself for the next phase of your life. So just do it in a structured and responsible, mature way, and make sure it's authentic to where you're at right now. The last thing I'm going to talk about is that blind faith and optimism comes up for inspection in these next 2 years. So we really want to make sure that we're grounded in reality. Questions that you can ask yourself for these next 2 years is, are my belief systems sound? Are they real? What do I stand for right here, right now? What kind of future am I working towards, and why? Why am I working towards that future? And, we're really also invited to look at what motivates us to move beyond the everyday grind, so that we can build something long-term that's of value and that's really, really solid. Again, Saturn is all about solidity and making it good for not just for yourself, but also for society and for everyone around you. So let's see. So think back to the period when Saturn was last in Sagittarius. If you were already alive at that time, or not, if you can remember it, if you weren't too young yet, November 1985 until November 1988, okay? During that time, Saturn moves through Sagittarius as well. And so if you can remember that time, what did you learn back then about life from your inner truth? What did you reach some kind of an understanding of something greater than yourself? Did you understand a little bit better about what your beliefs are at that time? Now remember, it won't be exactly the same this time around, because of course you no longer who you used to be 30 years ago or 28 years ago. You are now a new person with new realities, and therefore your belief systems need to adjust to what is so right now. Okay, so important to remember that. Now, in your own life, if you have your own birth chart, take a look, see where Saturn is transiting currently, what house placement it's in, because that area of your life is definitely the goal for that area of your life is to reach realistic, balanced, mature state in that area of your life, and to know what is so. If you don't know how to look that up, feel free to watch my video that's called How to Read Your Birth Chart. You can find that video on YouTube or on my website, or you can also email us at info@astrologercoach.com and write recording in the subject line, and we will send you a link to the recording with some handouts, all right? Now, if you do have an ascendant or sun sign in Capricorn, then you definitely have a greater need for expansion and learning and gathering knowledge. If you have an ascendant or sun sign in Sagittarius, for those of you that you definitely need to learn a greater sense of responsibility and need to be more realistic, more grounded, more serious, and more mature. So if you have any challenges moving through this phase with Sagittarius, with Saturn moving through your sign or moving over your ascendant, then definitely feel free to reach out. I'm happy to support you with a reading. I have something that I offer, which is a mini reading. It's a 25-minute reading where we can just take a look at that one transit in your chart, and it's very affordable to do that reading, and it's a great way to really help you prepare for that transit if you have something like that going on in your chart, okay? Now, at the very end of this video, I want to just take a couple of minutes to talk a little bit about some of the aspects that are coming up with Saturn to some of the other planets that are out there. Saturn is going to square Neptune, which will be exact in November of 2015, but we'll be feeling it from the end of October until the end of December of 2015. Now that aspect is a challenging one, which means we have to stretch ourselves, we have to grow beyond what we knew ourselves before. And this is definitely an aspect where we need to learn patience during this aspect. We certainly need to learn how to work with our idealistic selves and ourselves that are more realistic and are more grounded in reality. So we're really being confronted with certain fantasies that we're having, with disillusionments that we have about life, about people in our lives, with certain beliefs that we have. And so beliefs or methods that previously helped to soothe us or to help us feel kind of gentle about life may no longer work for us or may no longer satisfy our spirits. But it's definitely a time where we're learning to become more patient, where we're learning to see things more realistically, and to maybe also apply some of our idealism in the real world, and make sure that our beliefs and our sensing of the world is in alignment with each other. So definitely a time where we can rid ourselves of bad habits, anxieties, or addictions. So again, it's a growing aspect where we're really allowing ourselves to stretch. Okay. Now Saturn will be aligning with the natal Neptune for those of us born with Neptune in Sagittarius, and that generation is born between 1970 and 1984. So all of us who have that will have Saturn conjuncting their natal Neptune, and that's a time where we can really make our dreams reality. However, we need to really bring a good dose of realism to all the things in our lives that we have an idealistic way of looking at. So anything that's fantasy or illusion or dreams, anything that's connected to our spiritual path, anything that's connected to our feeling body, to our intuitive body, we're now ready to really bring that into the real world and have some concrete connection to that within us. So that could be challenging for some of us. Again, it depends on how out there we are or how grounded we are with our dreams. So depending on where we're at, we might experience this as more challenging or as more beneficial. All right. Now Saturn will square Jupiter as well. That will be exact right around the time when Saturn stations to go retrograde in March of 2016. And then again in May of 2016. However, we'll be feeling it from early March until mid-June of 2016. So this really reinforces what we already talked about with Saturn and Sagittarius, just that we might feel that it's a little bit more challenging. We might have to stretch ourselves just a little bit more in regards to our beliefs, in regards to our assumptions, in regards to our expectations in life. It might feel a little bit heavy, and we might feel a little bit overwhelmed sometimes. So again, just as best as you can, see it as an opportunity to grow and to expand beyond who you used to be. And take it one step at a time. With Saturn, always good advice is to take it one step at a time so you don't get overwhelmed or scared. Now, Saturn will also trine Uranus, which is a strengthening and a harmonious aspect. And this is strong from January until the end of March of 2016. And then again from December 2016 until June of 2017. And October of 2017 until this early December of 2017. Whew, okay, so lots of places where this is exact. And this aspect, Saturn-Uranus aspect, helps us with embracing something new, something unusual. So this is really supporting us in moving away from the things that no longer serve us or our soul's evolution. And so we're more likely to be doing something that we enjoy and enjoying the things that we're doing. So this is actually a very positive thing that will happen, and it will also help us a little bit more with some of the challenging aspects that are happening in 2016 as well. All right. So if you personally want to understand the Saturn transit in your own chart more fully in connection to, your own personal planets, what house it's in, all that good stuff, feel free to reach out for a mini reading. I'm happy to support you with all the challenging aspects of Saturn, but also with all the gifts that this transit has for you, because it certainly also carries a lot of gifts that we sometimes neglect to look at with Saturn transits. So feel free to go to my website at AstrologerCoach.com to the services page to book such a reading. And if you want to stay in alignment with my astrological transits, feel free to go to my Facebook fan page at AstrologerCoach.SonjaFrancis, or my Twitter page at Sonja Francis. Or you can also subscribe to my weekly forecasts if you wanted to have a little bit more of a detailed explanation of everything that goes on in astrology with all the transits. If you're a student of astrology, those are really wonderful. You can subscribe by emailing us at info@astrologercoach.com and just write weekly forecasts in the subject line, and we'll add you to that mailing list. That will be sent out once a week on Sunday evening. And then I also have a newsletter mailing list that gets sent out twice a month. So if you'd rather just be informed with my videos and with what's coming up in terms of teaching and retreats and things like that, then feel free to sign up for my newsletter at info@astrologercoach.com, and you just write newsletter in the subject line, and I'll be adding you to that mailing list. All right. So I hope this was helpful, and definitely feel free to reach out throughout these next 2 years if you need any support at all with this transit. I know it can sometimes be a little bit challenging, but I'd be very happy to guide you and support you through it by giving you a reading for this transit. All right. So have a good one. This is Astrologer Coach Sonja Francis. Goodbye.